All right, everyone. So the Bills firing McDermott was quite a shock to me. It wouldn't have been a shock if the Bills lost in the wild card round. It wouldn't have been a shock if the Bills didn't make the playoffs. But considering how they lost the game, I was stunned that they went ahead with it. And so they had their press conference today, the GM, which many people think should have been fired, and the owner. And so there's a few clips we're going to go over. Let's start with this one.
The fact that you have not given Josh a good enough wide receiver room.
Yeah, can I interrupt? I'll address the Keon situation. The coaching staff pushed to draft Keon. I'm not saying Brandon wouldn't have drafted him, but he wasn't his next choice. That was Brandon being a team player and taking advice of his coaching staff, who felt strongly about the player. And, he's taken, for some reason, heat over it and not saying a word about it. But I'm here to tell you the true story.
So this was bizarre to me, and people are putting clips out of actually the GM saying he liked Coleman or whatever. Well, that's kind of paraphrasing what the clip was, but basically saying that he was willing to draft them. Right? To me, none of that even matters. Just the fact that he said this. So is the argument here? Let's say Keon Coleman is good next year. Obviously he had a rough year, but let's say he's really good next year. Does this mean that if he's good, that we should give the credit to McDermott because that doesn't make any sense to me at the end of the day, right? Why you would use this as your excuse, especially because we're talking about one draft pick here. We're talking about one draft pick. What about the entire time Josh Allen has been there, right? I understand he had Stephon Diggs for some of those years, but the point is the idea that, we couldn't give Josh Allen the help because we drafted Keon Coleman. It's like, what about all of the other positions? It's not like, Buffalo had this elite defense and the only weakness this team had was receiver. Buffalo was basically reliant heavily on Josh Allen producing at an all-time level. That's just the truth of the matter. Okay, so let's go up here to this one. Now, this is the one I felt even more interested in. This was Bills owner Terry Pagula says it was the distraught players that influenced the McDermott firing. He, talking about Josh Allen, sat there sobbing. He was listless. I saw the pain in Josh's face as a presser, and I felt his pain. I know we can do better. This makes no sense to me. And I've heard this even from some people on TV, right? Some journalists on TV referring to this as maybe a reason why McDermott was fired. Josh Allen is the reason, right, that the Bills were where they were. There's no question about it. He is their best player, and he played phenomenally. He makes plays that, very few quarterbacks could ever make. It's also true that one of the major reasons they lost that game against the Broncos was because of Josh Allen. It just was. I mean, you have the fumbles, right? Especially the one right before half. You have interception. You have some missed throws. It wasn't McDermott. McDermott didn't do that. I'm not saying McDermott was perfect, but it just seemed to me like McDermott is being scapegoated here. And the arguments being made don't really add up to me. It's like, well, you saw what people looked like in the locker room. It's like, okay. So people were distraught after they lost the game that they definitely should have won. And they probably feel, and I would agree with this wholeheartedly, that had they won that game, they would beat the Patriots and make the Super Bowl. Not that I don't think the Patriots are good, but I would have just thought that the Patriots, to me, are the team that Buffalo would most want to see again out of a lot of these teams, just because I think they feel that the Patriots are a team. Look, their defense has looked a lot better in, the playoffs here, but they feel like they could put up those points. And if Drake May isn't on and he's turning the ball over, maybe, they pull that one out. That's why they were distraught. Josh Allen understands that. He took ownership for it at the podium. And that's not a knock on Josh Allen. It's just pointing out that, his turnovers were the reason that game was as close as it was, and therefore they lost. I understand there was a call that I didn't fully agree with. You know, I mean, kind of going back and forth on it, but at the time, I certainly didn't fully agree with it. I still don't understand fully the rule on that, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And to me, this whole press conference and everything I saw about it was kind of a let's throw McDermott under the bus for things that probably weren't even his fault, right? It's like, especially this, it's like I understand the point the owner was trying to make there. He's trying to protect the GM by saying, you guys are, knocking the roster here, but the truth is, these were actually players that McDermott wanted. It's like, so if Keon Coleman's good, then what does that say? You actually have a bad GM and you just fired a guy that had, like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, really any of this. And so that's all we got, because I think these to me were the big two moments, but this just felt like, let's throw this guy under the bus because, we have to, right? Because we made these decisions and we can't really, it's almost like you can't really defend why he made them. So you just throw that guy under the bus. We'll see if this ends up being the right move. I have a really bad feeling, and I don't like to say this because I'm kind of rooting for, Buffalo in a sense of that fan base just is so tortured, right? It's like they're always knocking on the door and just can never get over the hump. But to me, this is the beginning of what's going to be a very rough next few seasons for them. Even though they have Josh Allen, it just feels like, we've seen the players speak out about it. If they can't get a big name in there, if they can't get somebody who's going to be able to give you what even McDermott gave you, it's going to be a problem, right? And it's Josh Allen is young, but he doesn't, he's not a rookie by any means. So you're not going to want a situation where if a coach he's has for 4 years doesn't work out, now you're in trouble.